My name is Elena Porter, and I turned 22 on the day my parents decided I was no longer their responsibility. I remember standing in our pristine suburban kitchen, where every countertop gleamed like a showroom and even the fruit bowl was staged to perfection. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee, still half asleep, when I softly said, "Good morning." My mother barely looked up from her tablet, and my father continued reading the financial section of the newspaper with clinical detachment. I had hoped for something different, anything to break the heavy silence that had become our norm. "It's my birthday today," I offered, voice tentative. "We're aware of the date," my mother replied without lifting her eyes. That's how it began. No card, no hug, not even a muttered happy birthday. Just two people sitting at a marble counter pretending I didn't exist. I had spent my whole life under their roof, in that perfectly curated house with monogrammed towels and rigid dinner schedules. My mother, Diane, had built her world around appearances, designer handbags, photo-perfect holiday cards, and plastic smiles at charity events. My father, Gregory, was a financial advisor with his own firm. He paid for everything, and he made sure we all knew it. He didn't shout or throw things. No, his control came in the form of silence, contracts, and the unspoken terms attached to every dollar he spent on me. From a distance, our lives looked perfect. But inside that manicured fortress, I was suffocating. As a kid, nothing I did was ever enough. Diane demanded straight A's, weekly extracurriculars, and spotless posture at every public event. She often said, "Presentation is everything," as if life were a resume. I loved drawing, and she hated that. When I made a sculpture of a tree in 6th grade, she said, "What is this mess?" My passion for art only deepened, which became a problem in high school when I told them I wanted to study graphic design. Gregory shook his head and said, "Art is not a career. It's a hobby people grow out of. You'll thank me later." They didn't scream. They didn't ground me. Instead, they imposed invisible limits. When I got into State University on a partial scholarship, they offered to help with tuition, but insisted the bank account be joint. They said it was to teach me budgeting, but it was really so they could track every dollar. If I bought a textbook, I'd get a text. If I spent $6 on coffee, there'd be a budget review. Once I tried saving up to move into an apartment with my friends. I worked weekends at a campus coffee shop and kept the cash in a hidden tin box in my dorm. Somehow, Gregory found out. He called the landlord directly and canceled my lease application. Told them I wasn't financially responsible enough. By senior year, I'd stopped sharing anything with them. They didn't know about my portfolio projects, the design competitions I entered, or the nights I cried into my sketchbook wondering if I was losing my mind or just my identity. My best friend, Mariah, was the only one who knew everything. She saw how I flinched when my phone buzzed with a call from my mother, how I smiled falsely whenever Gregory asked about my silly doodles. 3 months before graduation, during a Sunday dinner of roasted salmon and forced conversation, Gregory cleared his throat and dropped a bomb. "Elena, it's time to stop wasting money on that major. You either switch to finance or business now, or we pull funding. 4 years is more than enough to indulge this phase." Diane didn't even blink. "We only want what's best for you," she said, buttering her roll. "Your cousin Rachel already has an offer from Goldman Sachs." I sat there stunned. "I'm 3 months from graduating," I said. "My final portfolio is due in 6 weeks. I can't just start over. Then you'll need to figure out how to pay for it yourself, Gregory said, like he was reading off a weather forecast. The air at home became unbearable after that. My every move was under a microscope. Diane picked on my outfits. You'll never get hired looking like that. Gregory critiqued my spending. Even coffee has consequences. My mental health spiraled. I stopped sleeping properly. I started skipping meals. Mariah noticed the shadows under my eyes and the silence in my laugh. Then came my birthday. Mariah had planned to take me out for a quiet dinner, just sushi and conversation. I mentioned it at breakfast, hoping it might spark something warm. But instead, Diane texted Mariah later that day asking for details. That evening, I walked into the house to hear my parents arguing about the situation. Their voices dropped to a whisper when they heard my key turn in the door. Despite everything, I hoped stupidly that they might be planning something good, maybe a surprise dinner, maybe an apology. The next morning, I went about my day with shaky optimism. My design professor, Dr. Patterson, pulled me aside after class and said, "Your portfolio shows real vision. Don't doubt yourself. Your talent is undeniable." Her words gave me a tiny flicker of courage. Mariah gave me a hand-woven bracelet in sunset colors. "For freedom," she whispered as she tied it on my wrist. I clung to her kindness like a raft. That evening, I returned home just after 6. The house was eerily silent. My parents sat in the living room, formal and still, like they were waiting to fire an employee. Gregory had a file folder in his lap. Diane held a glass of wine and wore her serious talk expression, the one she usually reserved for lectures about reputation. "Sit," Gregory said, pointing to the armchair across from them. I sat slowly, tension crawling over my skin. "We've reviewed our household finances," he began, opening the folder. Inside were printouts my banking activity, purchases, transfers, even Venmo receipts. "Your spending habits are unsustainable," Diane said. "And it's not just the money, it's the pattern, the disrespect, the poor decisions." "What decisions?" I asked, genuinely confused. "My grades are fine. I don't party. I work. The major," Gregory said sharply. "The secret apartment application. The cash income you didn't declare." "You went through my accounts," I whispered. "We had every right," Diane snapped. "We've paid for your entire existence." Gregory leaned forward. "We're done, Elena. We're not funding your rebellion anymore. You want independence? You've got it." I stared. "You mean—" "You're leaving," Diane confirmed. "Tonight." "Tonight? But what? I have nowhere to go. You have friends. You have your dreams. Now you get to see if they can pay rent." Gregory slid a printed document across the table. "Final tuition payment has been made. Insurance policies end today. Your car registration is due next month. We will not be renewing it." "You can't be serious. You have 30 minutes to pack. Anything left behind is ours." I was trembling as I climbed the stairs. My heart thudded so loudly it drowned out thought. I stuffed clothes into a suitcase, grabbed my laptop, my sketch pad, the bracelet Mariah had given me. The rest, my childhood art, my favorite novels, even my camera was left behind. Technically theirs, they would argue, like I'd always been. Gregory called from downstairs. 25 minutes, Elena." I texted Mariah with shaking fingers. "They're kicking me out. Tonight. Can I come over?" She called instantly. Yes, of course. I'm already on my way. No time, I said. I'll drive. I grabbed the last of my things and descended the stairs like someone walking away from a life sentence. They stood silently by the door, arms crossed. Keys, Gregory demanded. I handed them over. Diane's parting words. This is your choice, Elena. When you're ready to act like an adult, we can discuss terms. I looked at her, at both of them. I won't be back. Rain started as I loaded the car, my suitcase soaked, my hair clinging to my face. As I pulled out of the driveway, I looked back one last time at the house I'd called home for 22 years. The windows glowed with warm light. Inside, they were probably already discussing their next social event, already rewriting the narrative. Outside, I was soaked, shaken, and completely alone. But I was also free. The rain didn't let up during the drive to Mariah's apartment, and neither did the shaking in my hands. I couldn't stop replaying their words, their faces. You're nothing but a burden. Tonight, as in now. I'd always known my parents held their love hostage, but I didn't realize they were willing to cut the cord so completely, so cruelly. Every raindrop that hit the windshield felt like a confirmation, yes, this was real. Yes, this was happening. Yes, you're now on your own. Mariah's apartment was a cramped one-bedroom she shared with Kimberly, a biology major with chronic migraines and a quiet smile. The second I stepped through the door, soaked to the skin, my suitcase dripping on their linoleum floor, they wrapped me in towels and understanding. They really did it? Kimberly asked, handing me a cup of peppermint tea I could barely hold. Mariah pulled me onto the couch, arms around my shoulders like scaffolding. You're safe here, okay? Stay as long as you need. That first night, I barely slept. Not because the couch was lumpy or the room too warm, but because my mind couldn't stop spinning. What now? I had 3 months left to graduate. No home, no family, no health insurance, no access to the savings account I thought was mine but had apparently always been theirs. I checked my bank app in the dark at 3 a.m. My balance, $237.40. My other account, the joint one, had vanished from my access screen. The next morning, with zero sleep and an aching head, I made my way to the university's financial aid office. I arrived 30 minutes before they opened and waited outside with my student ID clenched like a lifeline. When the doors finally unlocked, I sat across from a counselor named Mrs. Harrell, who looked at me with tired but gentle eyes. I'm so sorry you're going through this, she said after hearing my story. But since your FAFSA lists your parents' income, we still have to classify you as a dependent. But they kicked me out. I don't have anywhere to go. I believe you, she said, but the federal rules require documentation. Either tax forms proving you've supported yourself for a full year or legal emancipation. I left with a thick packet of forms. Emergency loan applications, short-term housing requests, work-study schedules, all of it felt crushingly inadequate. What I needed was a roof, a stable income, a way to finish the degree I had fought tooth and nail for. What I had was a couch, a coffee shop job with 12 shifts a week, and a backpack of sketchbooks that now represented my entire identity. At the coffee shop later that day, I begged my manager Jordan for more hours. I can give you 10 extra this week, he said, scratching his beard. That's all we've got in the budget, 10 hours, at minimum wage. Not enough for rent, not even close. I spent the next few days in survival mode, showered at the gym, slept on the couch with my backpack as a pillow, stored my suitcase behind Mariah's closet door. My professors started to notice. I was late to class. I missed an assignment. I showed up looking like someone who didn't know where she'd sleep next. Dr. Patterson pulled me aside after critique one afternoon. "Elena, your lines are rushed. Colors muddy. This isn't you." "I'm fine," I lied, my voice barely convincing even to myself. "No, you're not," she said gently. "My office is open if you ever wanted to talk." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed with texts from Gregory demanding I return property I'd wrongfully taken, including the laptop they gave me for high school graduation and the suitcases themselves. Diane, ever the PR expert, had begun messaging relatives with a narrative that painted me as unstable and rebellious, someone who had stormed out of the house in a fit of entitlement. "We did everything for her," she wrote in a group chat, "but you can't help someone who refuses to be helped." I read her words on Mariah's phone and felt something inside me snap. The humiliation, the gaslighting, the way they discarded me and then immediately rewrote the story to maintain their perfect image. It was unbearable. One night, while I was hunched over a campus computer in the library, trying to finish a half-hearted mock-up of a flyer for class, Tyler, one of the students from my advanced design class, noticed me. "You good?" he asked, sitting beside me, setting his laptop down. I almost laughed. "No, not even a little." He didn't press, just waited. "They froze my account," I finally said. "I had a little money left, but they claimed it was fraudulent or something. The bank's investigating. I'm broke, homeless, and I have a portfolio due in 2 weeks." Tyler whistled low. "That's rough. Your parents ever do anything like that?" He paused, then nodded. "When I came out, my dad cut me off, tried to lock everything down. Financial control is just emotional abuse in a suit and tie." I looked at him sideways. "So how did you survive?" He gave me a thin smile. "I got smart, learned how to protect myself, learned how banks work, where the loopholes are. It's amazing how much power people give away with their passwords." That night, we sat in a coffee shop until closing. Tyler explained how credit freezes worked, how you could lock down someone's financial identity using legal tools, security alerts, verification requests, fraud protection services. He showed me how older people often reused passwords and rarely updated security questions, how most of them never even realized how exposed they were. "You're not suggesting I steal anything," I clarified. "Nope, not even close. I'm saying if they've treated you like an enemy, maybe it's time they experience a little of what they've put you through legally." I didn't sleep again that night. My head spun with possibilities, not revenge in the cinematic sense, but consequences. A taste of what it felt like to lose access, to panic, to lose control. The next day, Mariah sat next to me on the couch and said gently, "Be careful. I get it you want them to suffer, but don't become them. That's not who you are." I looked her in the eye. "They took everything from me. I have no safety net, no apology, no remorse. They're not just controlling, they're cruel. I know. I just don't want you to lose yourself in punishing them." But I was already halfway down that road. I started planning, quietly, carefully. Not on my laptop, which my father had probably already flagged, but on campus computers, using incognito mode, private email addresses, and borrowed logins. I accessed accounts I'd helped them set up years ago, because they were technophobes, and I was their digital secretary. I remembered Gregory's favorite password formula, his birth year, his company acronym, and an exclamation mark. It still worked. Of course it did. I didn't change anything. I didn't take anything. I just set a few things in motion. Credit freezes on all 3 bureaus. Security alerts requesting additional ID for every login attempt. Password reset questions edited by 1 letter, just enough to throw verification off. I forwarded recovery email alerts to an anonymous inbox, and then I waited. What I wanted wasn't destruction. What I wanted was understanding. And if they wouldn't listen to me, then maybe they'd hear it through a declined card at a restaurant, a locked banking portal, a customer service agent telling them to verify your identity by fax within 3 to 5 business days. When it finally started to unfold, it happened quickly. My cousin forwarded me a group text from Diane. Strange issue with our accounts today. Richard thinks it might be fraud. If anyone needs to reach us, call not text. Phone's acting up too. I felt a strange, quiet satisfaction. The kind that comes not from vengeance, but from justice being slightly, briefly restored. They were confused, powerless, inconvenienced, just like me. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was breathing in my own lungs, not just existing inside someone else's system. I didn't wake up in a cold sweat or with a knot in my chest. The silence in Mariah's apartment was comforting instead of suffocating. Still, I couldn't stop checking the anonymous email account I'd created to monitor the credit freeze notifications and security alerts. Every new ping gave me a hit of strange satisfaction. Every automated message confirming yet another failed login attempt by Gregory or Diane felt like a whispered validation. You can't control me anymore. By day 3 of their financial limbo, their world was starting to unravel. According to Mariah, who got the latest gossip from her mother, who had lunch with Diane every other Friday, my mom had been embarrassed at a boutique restaurant when both her cards were declined in front of her garden club. She had to call another member to pay. My father, meanwhile, had reportedly experienced a similar humiliation during a business lunch when his corporate card failed. An associate picked up the tab while Gregory muttered something about fraud monitoring systems. Their responses were predictable. First came confusion, then frustration, then desperation. According to Tyler, who helped me double-check everything, their credit bureaus now required mailed identity verifications to unlock their accounts. You didn't do anything illegal, he reassured me. They'll fix it eventually, but they're definitely sweating. And they were. They just had no idea why. That week, I also received an email from my old art professor, Dr. Carter. He had seen my preliminary designs for our department's spring showcase and wanted to include 2 of my pieces. Your work carries a rawness I haven't seen before, he wrote. Pain is a powerful color when used with restraint. His words pierced through my haze, because as much as I was living out this carefully calculated disruption, a part of me was still very much bleeding. Mariah noticed before I even said it aloud. You got them panicking, Elena, she said one night as we shared microwaved noodles, but you're still stuck in their shadow. I know, I said. I can't seem to let go. Letting go doesn't mean they win, she reminded me. It means they stop taking from you, even your time, your thoughts, your energy. I wanted to believe her, but every day I still checked the monitoring email first thing. I still looked for updates like it was a news cycle I couldn't stop following. I watched Diane cancel her weekly salon appointment. Heard from Mariah that Gregory was rescheduling client meetings, claiming technical disruptions. Their curated life was cracking, and I was the one who had pulled the first thread. But the unraveling wasn't just theirs. My grades were slipping. I couldn't focus during critiques. I missed an important work-study meeting because I was too exhausted from refreshing emails and researching legal loopholes. I was watching their house fall down while mine hadn't even been built. Then came the message that broke something open in me. It was from Diane. Subject: Reflection Body. Elena, we've been speaking with family members who are very concerned about your behavior. We understand you've chosen to leave our home and live elsewhere, but we hope this rebellious phase ends soon. We're willing to discuss terms for your return if you're prepared to apologize and be reasonable. Your future still matters to us. Mom, apologize. Be reasonable. As if being evicted on my birthday were a mutual decision, as if my homelessness had been my choice. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. I wanted to scream. Instead, I clicked delete. But I couldn't unfeel what it stirred. I spent that night walking alone near campus, the air biting at my face. I ended up outside the design building, where light still poured from a second-floor window. Dr. Patterson's office. I didn't think. I climbed the steps and knocked. She let me in without surprise. "I was wondering when you'd show up," she said simply. I didn't speak right away. I just sank into the chair across from her, shoulders sagging. "They kicked me out," I said finally, "on my birthday." She nodded slowly. "I figured something was going on. They've tried to ruin me financially ever since. I've done things to slow them down, nothing illegal, just made it hard for them." "Revenge?" she asked, without judgment in her voice. "No," I said. "Yes, maybe. I don't know." She folded her hands. "Elena, I've seen students weaponize pain in all sorts of ways. Some build masterpieces from it. Some build walls. Some set fires. But whatever you do, make sure it's shaping your future, not chaining you to your past." Her words stayed with me the rest of the week. Then something unexpected happened. I got an email from a design agency in Portland, a small firm with a national reputation. They'd seen my work through a faculty recommendation. They wanted to schedule an interview for a summer internship. Fully paid. High responsibility. Career-changing. The kind of opportunity people like Gregory once said I'd never earn. But I couldn't think clearly about it. Not while I was still spending my nights refreshing inboxes, waiting for the next sign of my parents' inconvenience. I was choosing to stay connected to them just through another, darker thread. That night, I opened the anonymous email account one last time. I compiled everything, login instructions, reset pathways, bureau contact info into a single document and scheduled it to send to my father's recovery email in 3 days. The same way the problem had arrived. Quietly, legally, without trace. When I told Mariah what I had done, she didn't say anything right away. She just hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "Not because you let go of them, but because you chose yourself." And for the first time, I really had. I wasn't living on borrowed time anymore. I wasn't trying to win their approval or sabotage their peace. I was just stepping out of their orbit. I focused entirely on preparing for the internship interview, updated my portfolio, rebuilt my resume, spent late nights in the design lab where my ideas finally began flowing again. I found a rhythm, a sense of self that wasn't defined by what I'd lost, but by what I was creating. I still slept on Mariah's couch. Still had only 3 pairs of jeans and $12 in my checking account. But I felt richer than I had in years. Letting go wasn't a surrender. It was a reclaiming, and I was just getting started. 3 days after I scheduled the anonymous email, I stopped checking for updates. I didn't want to know if they'd regained control of their accounts, if they'd figured out it had been me all along. I didn't care. That part of the story, my time as their pawn, their project, their disappointment, was over. I had other things to focus on. My interview with the Portland firm was approaching fast, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was excited, not just afraid. I locked myself into the design lab every night, headphones in, fingers flying across my tablet. I rebuilt my portfolio from the ground up clean, raw, authentic. No more pretending to be what they wanted. No more forced minimalism to appeal to corporate sensibilities. I let myself be messy. I let myself tell the truth through color and shape and space. And when I showed the final draft to Dr. Carter, he smiled in that quiet way of his and said, "This is your voice, finally." Meanwhile, the housing office called. A spot had opened up in graduate student housing, a tiny studio left behind by someone who dropped out mid-semester. It was barely bigger than a dorm room, the walls were thin, and the radiator hissed like an angry snake, but it was mine. My name on the lease, my key on my ring, my body in a bed I didn't have to leave before sunrise. I moved in with only what I could carry, my backpack, one suitcase, and a cardboard box of art supplies. Mariah helped me arrange the furniture, what little there was, and we celebrated with instant noodles eaten on the floor and a single scented candle from the dollar store. That night, for the first time in weeks, I took a deep breath and didn't feel like I was about to fall apart. The campus job at Patterson had quietly helped me land in the university design department, paid just enough for groceries and internet. I created posters for student events, updated web banners for the school's social media pages, and proofed flyers for the Career Center. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. And more importantly, it was mine. No one controlled the money. No one audited my purchases. No one used it to buy my silence. Slowly, I began to build structure out of chaos. I applied for independent student scholarships, wrote essays late at night in my overheated room, and started attending the free therapy sessions offered by the counseling center. Dr. Nelson, my assigned therapist, was the first adult in my life to hear the full story without judgment or correction. She never asked me to forgive, only to understand. "When control masquerades as care," she said once, "it's easy to confuse cruelty for love. But what they did wasn't love, Elena. It was ownership." Her words rattled something loose in me. I had spent years believing that if I just worked harder, looked better, smiled more, obeyed faster, I would finally be worthy of their approval. But their approval had never been real. It was a leash, not a lifeline. One afternoon, while sipping bad vending machine coffee in the campus library, I opened an email that made my heart stop. The subject line, "Internship offer, next steps." I read it twice before it sunk in. I had been selected. I was going to Portland. The paid internship began 2 weeks after graduation. It came with a housing stipend and the promise of full-time employment if all went well. I stared at the screen, blinking back tears. I had done this. Not Gregory, not Diane. Me. Elena Porter, homeless, discarded, undeniably talented. I printed the offer letter and pinned it above my desk. That night I didn't call Mariah. I didn't tell anyone. I sat with the feeling by myself, letting the pride soak in like sunlight after a long storm. The next day, I ran into Tyler on campus. He hadn't seen me since the last strategy session in the off-campus caf where we'd planned out my digital revenge. "You look different," he said. "Lighter." "I let it go," I told him. He nodded once. "Good. They don't deserve your headspace." He was right. I had stopped checking my anonymous inbox, stopped reading Diane's manipulative group texts or Gregory's cold demands. I no longer cared if they thought I was unstable, ungrateful, or lost. I wasn't lost. I was rebuilding. That spring, my final semester passed in a blur of deadlines, critiques, late-night ramen, and growing confidence. My professors noticed the change. "You're present now," Dr. Carter told me one morning. "You're not designing to escape. You're designing to speak." And I had a lot to say. My final portfolio told the story I had never spoken aloud. It was filled with illustrations of doors slamming shut and windows opening, of a girl standing in the rain with her suitcase and another rising from the ashes of a house on fire, of silence breaking, chains snapping, colors bleeding into pages that had once been blank. During our department showcase, a gallery owner approached me and asked if I would be willing to display 2 of my pieces in a summer exhibit on emerging artists. "Your work feels lived," he said. "There's truth in it." I agreed before the tears could escape. On the day I graduated, Mariah screamed the loudest in the crowd. Kimberly brought me flowers wrapped in newspaper. Tyler gave me a single line. "You didn't just survive, you started a new lineage." I walked across the stage without a single family member in the audience, and yet, for the first time, I felt completely surrounded. Not by blood, but by chosen family, by solidarity, by freedom. After the ceremony, I sat alone for a moment in the grass behind the design building and watched the sun set over the campus skyline. 1 year ago, I had been evicted, insulted, erased. Today, I had become someone new, not in spite of that day, but because of it. And I wasn't finished yet. I moved to Portland with a suitcase, a backpack, and a sense of quiet triumph pulsing beneath my ribs. The internship housing was modest, a shared space with 2 other design students from different schools, but it had a small window that let in the morning light, a desk I could call my own, and most importantly, the kind of silence that didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. The design firm was everything I had imagined and more. High ceilings, mismatched coffee mugs, clients who wanted substance over flash, and mentors who didn't just critique, they taught. My supervisor, Cam, had a background in community-focused design and often said, "Design isn't decoration, it's communication." Those words settled in me like a compass. I worked harder than I ever had before, staying late when no one asked, revising drafts with obsessive care, bringing ideas to meetings that surprised even myself. After my first month, Cam pulled me aside and said, "You've got vision, Elena, but more than that, you've got grit. Keep showing up like this, and there'll be a seat for you here long after summer." I nodded, blinking back the emotion I refused to let spill over, because I knew what it had taken to arrive here. Not just a plane ticket or a polished portfolio, but the slow excavation of a self that had been buried under years of conditional love and disguised manipulation. I rented a room in a house with 2 other interns, both artists, both loud and chaotic and kind. Our home was messy but full of color. We cooked together on Sundays, danced to terrible playlists on Thursdays, and taped each other's work to the fridge like kids showing off gold stars. I began to laugh again. Not performative laughter. Not the cautious, curated smile I used to offer at my parents' dinner tow parties. But real laughter, the kind that shook my ribs and reminded me I was alive. Slowly, my life began to expand. I applied for more gallery showings, started a freelance page, wrote blog posts about design and identity and survival, and people listened. They read, they reached out. One girl emailed me from Missouri. "Your post about being cut off by your parents saved me. I thought I was the only one." I wrote back, "You're never the only one, and you're stronger than you think." I joined a support group for students who had survived estrangement, mostly online. People who had been disowned for their sexuality, their religion, their careers, their resistance. We swapped stories and resources and survival strategies. We weren't broken. We were forged. I never told Diane or Gregory where I had moved. They sent messages, occasionally some cold, some sweet-coated, all laced with the same unspoken demand: return. Diane wrote, "It's been almost a year. We're ready to forgive and start over, if you're willing to act maturely." Gregory emailed once, "Your laptop was ours. If you don't return it, we'll take legal action." I responded once, "I only took what was mine. That includes my future." I didn't hear back, and I didn't expect to. I no longer needed their permission to exist. My therapist, Dr. Nelson, helped me understand the cycle: control, punishment, silence, bait. "They're not reaching out to reconcile," she told me one afternoon. "They're reaching out to restore the version of you that fit their world." I didn't fit anymore. I didn't want to. By fall, I was offered a full-time position at the design firm. Cam said simply, "We want you here." No conditions, no strings, just a door held open. I accepted and celebrated by buying a second-hand bike and painting it bright yellow. Mariah visited that winter. She walked through my house, touched the rough wooden shelves I'd installed myself, opened my fridge, and smiled. "You did it," she whispered. "You made a life." We celebrated with chocolate cake on the floor and danced to a playlist that was pure nostalgia. That night, I gave her the bracelet she'd made me a year ago, sunset threads, slightly faded but still strong. "You tied this around my wrist the day they kicked me out," I said. "Now I want you to keep it. It carried me through." She held it to her chest. "You carried yourself through. I just reminded you who you were." My 23rd birthday came with no drama, no screaming, no rain. Just people I loved, music, candles, and a card that read, "Here's to the first year of freedom and to the rest of your life." As we sat on my porch under soft string lights, I thought about that night I'd stood in the rain with my suitcase and my silence. I thought about how far I'd come. And I realized something I hadn't understood before. The greatest revenge isn't making them suffer. It's making sure they no longer get to define who you are. That night, I wrote in my journal, "They rejected me, but I didn't vanish. They tried to cut me off, but I grew, not because of their absence, but because I finally made room for myself." 1 year after they locked the door behind me, I unlocked my own. And this time, no one could throw me out.